Hello everyone and welcome back to another Dungeon Learner's Guide video. Today we have the Commander's Guild deck tech number 35 titled Shell Shocked. And if you haven't seen this show before, what we are doing is randomly selecting a card from scryfall.com, working with a budget of $100 or less, and building a deck around a theme of the chosen card. Now, before we get into the deck tech for today, I do want to very quickly touch on the fact that we do have some social media accounts. If you are interested in following us over on Twitter, you can check us out on Reddit. You can send us an email at dungeonlearnersguide@gmail.com. That is where we post new information about videos. We do small little deck techs where we can. And if you want to stay up to date on whatever we're doing, these would be the places to check us out. Now, with that out of the way, let's take a look at our card of the week, which was actually suggested to us on YouTube by MMK2903. And the suggestion for this week is a little bit unique because not only did it give us our random card, which is Archelos, Lagoon Mystic, it also gave us a bit of a theme to work around. So MMK specifically requested that we make a turtle tribal deck. So that is what we're doing today. And he had a couple more qualifications. There were a couple of turtles he wished were not included. So they're not in here, but I will be perfectly honest, there's not a ton of turtles. So we did what we could with what we had, and I think in the end it turned out pretty good. So otherwise though, we have our random card, as I mentioned, Archelos, Lagoon Mystic. It is 1 black, green, blue for a legendary creature, Turtle Shaman. It's a 2/4, and as long as Archelos, Lagoon Mystic is tapped, other permanents enter the battlefield tapped, and as long as Archelos is untapped, other permanents enter the battlefield untapped. Now, I'm sure you can probably take a guess already, though, if we move on from our random card to our commander for this week, it is actually going to be the same card. Remember that we do always try to make our random card the commander if possible. So if you have any suggestions for future videos and you want to suggest legendary creatures or just other random cards, I would be more than happy to take that into consideration and hopefully build those decks in the future as well. But for this week, we do have Archelos in the command zone as well. Now, as I've already mentioned, we do have some themes in here. The first one, a little bit obvious, it is Turtle Tribal. So that is represented here by Mistford River Turtle. It is 3 and a blue for a 1/5 turtle. Whenever Mistford River Turtle attacks, another target attacking non-human creature can't be blocked this turn. Lucky for us, we only really have turtles, so Mistford River Turtle definitely going to be getting some damage through. But this is a turtle tribal deck, so we have a ton of turtles, a ton of ways to synergize with turtles. Our main goal is to just roll out some turtles, and as the name suggests, completely shell shock our opponents. So that's theme number 1. Theme number 2 for this deck, though, is finding a way to make our turtles bigger, finding a way to make our turtles draw cards, and in general, just kind of trying to benefit from having turtles. So an example of that is Stoneforge Masterwork, 1 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it, and it equips for 2. So the more turtles we have, the bigger we can make one of our turtles, which becomes incredibly useful in the long run. And then finally, our last theme for this deck. As I mentioned, we don't have a ton of turtles to work with, so we do have some changelings in the deck. Turtle Shell Changeling, for example, 3 and a blue for a Shapeshifter. It's a 1/4. And it's a changeling, so it is every creature type at all times, meaning that they are always turtles. And we could pay 1 and a blue to switch Turtle Shell Changeling's power and toughness until end of turn. So, Turtle Shell obviously looks like a turtle, acts like a turtle. It is a turtle. But we do have some changelings that don't exactly look like turtles, but they still do the same job. And we did that because we kind of had to round out the deck a little bit. And it's nice, as we get going, you'll see some synergies that actually work pretty well with changelings and turtles combined. So with our themes out of the way, let's take a quick look at some key cards in this deck, some things that we would really like to get on board if we could. Now, the first of those is going to be Assault Formation. 1 and a green for an enchantment. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. You can pay a green, and target creature with Defender can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. And you can pay 3 mana, and creatures you control get +0/+1 until end of turn. Now, most turtles are very weak when it comes to power, but have very high toughness. So if we can make our 0/5 turtles attack as a 5/5, that's going to be much better for us in the long run, and it's going to give us a unique flexibility when it comes to a lot of our creatures. Our second key card is going to be Herald's Horn, 3 mana for an artifact. As Herald's Horn enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. A bit of a spoiler, it's going to be turtles. And creature spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast, which is very helpful. Turtles tend to be pretty on the expensive side here. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So we are able to reveal the top card of our deck and then draw it if it's a turtle, being able to give us, extra card draw, a little bit more cards in our hand to hopefully flood the board with turtles, and then slowly knock our opponents out of the game because, turtles don't move too quick. And then finally, our last key card is Crippling Fear, 2 black for a sorcery. Choose a creature type. Creatures that aren't of the chosen type get -3/-3 until end of turn. So for this deck, this is essentially a one-sided board wipe. We can get rid of most of our opponent's things. There are probably going to be some things that survive it, but even the things that do survive it are going to be much smaller, meaning our turtles can probably just roll right over them, not have to worry too much about it, and they can kind of, get knocked out by the slow-moving turtles as they come in. But that's the themes of this deck. Those are our key cards. The next thing I want to take a quick look at are some cool interactions in this deck, some cards that I think work super well together. The first of which is between Alpha Status and Changeling Outcast. So Alpha Status, 2 and a green for an Aura enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other creature in play that shares a creature type with it. Now it is important to note that it does say creature in play. It's not creatures we control. This also counts our opponent's creatures. So then if we combine that with Changeling Outcast, which is 1 black for a shapeshifter changeling, it's a 1/1, and it can't block and can't be blocked. Now, Changeling Outcast is every single creature type, which means that as long as we have Alpha Status on Changeling Outcast, it gets +2/+2 for every other creature on the board. So the fact that it's unblockable means that this can be very quickly becoming a threat. It can knock a bunch of people out. And as much as it might look kind of humanoid, we all know deep down that this is actually a turtle. So an unblockable turtle is exactly where we want to be with this deck. And then our second cool interaction is between Patriarch's Bidding and Pyre of Heroes. So Patriarch's Bidding, 3 black for a sorcery. Each player chooses a creature type, and then each player returns all creature cards of a type chosen this way from their graveyard to the battlefield. We really only have turtles in this deck. We do have 2 elves, but they're honorary turtles, let's be perfectly honest. So this is going to get back most of the creatures in our deck if they're in the graveyard. And then, obviously, we don't want to just, lose our turtles throughout the course of the game. We want to be able to put them into the graveyard on our own. And that is where Pyre of Heroes comes in, which is 2 mana for an artifact. You can pay 2, tap it, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost, and then put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So we can sacrifice some of our smaller turtles, get bigger turtles, sacrifice the bigger turtles, get some massive turtles, and then we cast a Patriarch's Bidding and get all the sacrificed turtles back, basically meaning that we just got a ton of cards for free. Well, maybe not exactly free, but pretty darn close, while hopefully our opponents didn't get too much back out of the Patriarch's Bidding. So these 2 cards, if given time, can be incredibly powerful when combined. But that is the majority of the deck tech. The only thing left to do for the deck tech itself is take a look at the price of the deck, which this week came in at $91.01, and the most expensive card in the deck was Vanquisher's Banner, which is 5 mana for an artifact. As Vanquisher's Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Once again, always going to be turtles. And then creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. So this does everything we want it to be doing. It makes our turtles bigger, draws us cards when we play turtles. This is just a win-win for this deck. Unfortunately, because it is so good in so many tribal decks, it is a $10 card. So if you are looking to cut down the price of this deck a little bit, cutting Vanquisher's Banner, putting it down to about $80, there are other ways that you could replace this effect. I would recommend Keeper of Fables, which would draw a card whenever one of your turtles hits an opponent, and that is about 30 cents or so. So there are budget options, but I just wanted to include this. We had the budget for it, so I figured, why not put it in the deck? Now, otherwise though, that is our deck for the week, and the last thing we're going to have to do is to jump into a game with some opponents. Now, this week we are joined by Lena, who is my fiance. She is playing the Gerard Golgari Lich Lord deck, and this is an elf tribal deck, so she wants to play a ton of elves, trying to get there as much as she can, trying to kind of flood the board, make them super big, and then smash into her opponents. We are also joined by Nina, who is playing Shadrick's Silverquill. I have played against the Shadrick's deck a few times. It is almost entirely a Strixhaven set deck, I suppose. I don't know what the correct word for it would be, but about 99% of the cards in this deck are actually from the Strixhaven set. So you wouldn't expect it to be too powerful, but Shadrick's can pack a heck of a punch, especially if he's gone unopposed. And then finally, we are joined by Kyle, who is playing Gadrak, the Crown Scourge, 2 and a red. This is the mono-red dragon that is going to make a ton of treasures. From what he says, this is the Gadrak's treasure hoard deck, so he really just wants to have a bunch of treasures and a bunch of artifacts that Gadrak kind of hoards, and then eventually Gadrak kind of picks apart his opponents as they go. So I am very much looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be tons of fun. I can't wait to see how some of these dragons and elves perform against the turtles. But I hope you guys enjoy the game, and I will talk to you all once it is done. At the start of the game, Lena goes first, followed by Nina, Kyle, and then myself. On her first turn, Lena plays a Path of Ancestry. Nina plays a Swamp. Kyle plays a Mountain. I play a Forest. Lena plays a Swamp, and then casts Miara, Thorn of the Glade, scrying 1 thanks to the Path of Ancestry. Nina plays a Plains. Kyle plays a Mountain, and then casts a Soulscar Mage, making it so any non-combat damage he does is in the form of -1/-1 counters. I play a Blighted Woodland. Lena plays a Terramorphic Expanse, sacrificing it to put a forest into play, and then attacks me for 1. Nina plays a Plains, and then casts Shale, Dean of Radiance. Kyle plays a Mountain, and then casts Spinning Wheel. On my turn, I play a Forest, and then I cast Guardian Gladewalker, which puts a +1/+1 counter on itself. On Lena's turn, she plays a Swamp, and then casts her commander, Gerard Golgari Lichlord, before attacking Nina for 1. On Nina's turn, she plays a Swamp, and then casts a Leech Fanatic, before attacking Kyle for 1. Kyle plays a Mountain, and then casts a Fractured Power Stone, and he follows that up by casting his commander, Gadrak the Crown Scourge, which makes a treasure in Kyle's end step for each creature that died on his turn. On my turn, I play a Scavenger Grounds and pass. Lena plays a Forest and casts Oakhame Adversary, which draws a card when it deals combat damage to a player, and also casts an Arcane Signet. Lena plays a Plains and casts Promising Dusk Mage before moving to combat and attacking me for 1 with Shale. Kyle casts a Treasure Map, and then casts Spit Flame, doing 4 damage to Miara and letting Lena pay 1 life to draw a card when she dies. Then, at the end of turn, Kyle makes a treasure token thanks to Gadrak's ability. On my turn, I play a Temple of Malady, scrying 1. Lena plays a Swamp and then casts Exquisite Huntmaster, which makes a 1/1 elf token when it dies, and then she attacks me for 3 with Jared. Nina casts an Inkling Summoning, creating a 2/1 Inkling token. Then at the end of turn, Kyle activates his Treasure Map to scry 1. On Kyle's turn, he casts Darksteel Ingot, and then attacks Lena for 1, and Lena blocks with her Exquisite Huntmaster, killing the Soulscar Mage. And as a side note, the Darksteel Ingot should have triggered Prowess, also killing the Huntmaster, but we don't notice that at the time. Then, in Kyle's end step, he makes a treasure token thanks to his commander, Gadrak. On my turn, I play an Island, and then cast Meandering Tower Shell. Lena plays a Forest, and then casts Binding the Old Gods, destroying my Meandering Tower Shell, and then she follows that up by casting a Steel Leaf Champion. On Nina's turn, she plays a Swamp, and casts her commander, Shadrak's Silverquill. She then moves to combat, triggering Shadrak's, putting a +1/+1 counter on each creature she controls, and letting Kyle draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks me for 3, and Lena for 2 with her flying creatures. At the end of turn, Kyle activates his treasure map to scry 1. On Kyle's turn, he casts Soul Grail, naming red so it can tap for red mana, and then casts Volcanic Fallout, doing 2 damage to each creature and player. This winds up making Lena an elf token when her Huntmaster dies, and then at the end of turn, Kyle makes 3 treasures with Gadrak since 3 creatures died. On my turn, I simply untap and then pass. Lena plays a Swamp, and then casts Vertus's Maneuver, naming herself and I as friends, and naming Kyle and Nina as foes. This lets Lena and I return a creature from our graveyard to our hands, while Nina and Kyle sacrifice a creature. Kyle sacrifices Gadrak, and Nina sacrifices the Promising Dusk Mage, drawing a card when it dies, since it had a +1/+1 counter on it. At this point, we also remember Binding the Old Gods, so Lena puts a Forest into play tapped. She then encores her Huntmaster, making 3 token copies of it, and then attacks Nina for 4, which she blocks with Shadrak's, me for 6, drawing a card with Occam Adversary, and Kyle for 11. Then, when she sacrifices all her Huntmasters at the end of turn, she makes 3 more elf tokens. On Nina's turn, she plays a Shine Shadow Snarl tapped, and casts Divine Gambit to exile Lena's Occam Adversary. This lets her play a permanent for free from her hand, playing a Soul Ring. Nina then moves to combat, triggering Shadrak's and putting a +1/+1 counter on all her creatures and letting Lena draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks Lena for 8 with Shadrak's. Then at the end of turn, Kyle once again activates his treasure map, scrying 1 and transforming it into Treasure Cove, making 3 treasure tokens. On Kyle's turn, he casts an Extruder, which lets him sacrifice an artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then recasts Gadrak. At the end of his turn, I sacrifice my Blighted Woodland to put an island and a swamp into play. On my turn, I cast a Brass Herald, naming Turtle. This gives my turtles +1/+1 and has me revealing the top 4 cards of my deck, putting all turtles into my hand. This winds up hitting an Amoeboid Changeling and a Bloodline Pretender. Lena plays a forest, and then casts Lena Bowmaster, and at this point we remember the Binding of the Old Gods, which goes to the graveyard and gives Lena's team Death Touch for the turn. She then moves to combat and attacks Kyle for 5, me for 3 with Jared, and Nina for 4. Then Kyle blocks the Steel Leaf Champion with his Extruder, activating it before damage so that he can sacrifice 5 treasures and put 5 +1/+1 counters on Gadrak. Then the damage happens, and the Extruder dies in combat. On Nina's turn, she plays a Plains, and then moves to combat, triggering Shadrax to put a +1/+1 counter on all of her creatures and letting me draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks me for 15 total damage, and I block the Leech Fanatic with my Herald, killing it while Nina gains 5 life. Then I take 10 commander damage from Shadrax, and then in Nina's second main phase, she casts a Reflective Golem. On Kyle's turn, he casts a Coveted Jewel, drawing 3 cards, and then plays a Mountain before casting and kicking a Skyclave Relic, making 2 copies of it when it enters. On my turn, I play a Swamp and cast Pillar of Origins, naming Turtle, so it taps for a mana of any color, but only to cast Turtle spells. I then cast a Bloodline Pretender, naming Turtles once again, so whenever I play a Turtle spell, I put a +1/+1 counter on the Pretender. Finally, I cast my commander, Archelos, Lagoon Mystic, putting a counter on the Bloodline Pretender. On Lena's turn, she casts an Eye Blight Colors, triggering Lena Bowmaster to do 2 damage to Shadrax. On Nina's turn, she casts Expanded Anatomy, targeting Reflective Golem, and paying 2 to copy it, also targeting Shadrax. This lets her put 2 +1/+1 counters on both of them and give them both Vigilance until the end of turn. She then moves to combat, triggering Shadrax, putting a +1/+1 counter on all of her creatures, and letting me draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks Lena for 18 damage with Shadrax, killing her with commander damage, and attacks me for 5 with the Golem. I decide to block with the Bloodline Pretender though, taking no damage. At the end of turn, Kyle casts a Draconic Roar to do 3 damage to Reflective Golem, killing it since it had already taken 3 damage this turn, and 3 damage to Nina since Kyle also controls a dragon. Then on Kyle's turn, he plays a Mountain, and cast Runed Crown, letting him search his library for a Rune of Speed and attach it to the crown, drawing a card. He immediately moves to equip the crown to Gadrak, giving him +1/+0 and haste. He follows that up by casting Pyrohemia, which can be activated for 1 red mana to do 1 damage to each creature and player. On my turn, I play a Ghost Quarter, and then cast Aphedo Dredging to return 3 turtle cards from my graveyard to my hand. This lets me return an Amoeboid Changeling, a Guardian Gladewalker, and a Litjara Kinseekers to my hand. I then cast the Amoeboid Changeling, and cast Litjara Kinseekers, putting a +1/+1 counter on it and scrying 1 since I control 3 turtles. On Nina's turn, she plays a Plains, and then moves to combat, triggering Shadrax to put a +1/+1 counter on her creatures, and letting me draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks me for 20 damage with Shadrax, killing me before the second hit from Double Strike even happens. On Kyle's turn, he casts a Manascape Refractor, and then activates Pyrohemia 7 times, doing 7 damage to each creature and player, killing Nina's Leech Fanatic. He then follows that up by casting Welding Sparks to do X damage to Shadrax, where X is 3 plus the artifacts Kyle controls, doing a total of 13 damage to Shadrax, killing Nina's commander. Then, at the end of turn, Gadrak triggers, making Kyle 2 more treasure tokens. On Nena's turn, she casts Devastating Mastery, destroying all non-land permanents, leaving Kyle with only a couple of indestructible mana rocks. Adding onto the board wipe, Nina casts Elite Spellbinder to look at Kyle's hand, and he reveals only Indomitable Creativity, which is exiled and now costs 2 more to cast. On Kyle's turn, he recasts Gadrak, and then casts a Martyr of Ashes. Nina casts a Defend the Campus to destroy Gadrak once again, and then moves to combat, attacking Kyle for 3 with the Elite Spellbinder. On Kyle's turn, he casts a Replicating Ring, and then casts Indomitable Creativity for X equals 2, destroying his own Martyr of Ashes and Replicating Ring to reveal cards from the top of his deck until he hits 2 artifacts or creatures, putting them into play. This has him hitting a War Elemental, which unfortunately dies when it enters the battlefield. And then he also hits a Torbran Thane of Redfell, which makes all his red sources deal an extra 2 damage. On Nina's turn, she recasts her commander, Shadrax, and then moves to combat, triggering Shadrax, putting a +1/+1 counter on her creatures and having Kyle draw a card and lose a life. And she then attacks Kyle for 4 with the Spellbinder. On Kyle's turn, he plays a mountain, and then casts a morph creature before recasting his commander, Gadrak. On Nina's turn, she casts a Pillar Drop Rescuer, returning Shale to her hand, and then recasts Shale. She then moves to combat, triggering Shadrax, putting a +1/+1 counter on her team, and letting Kyle draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks Kyle for 13 total damage in the air. Kyle blocks Shadrax with Gadrak, killing Gadrak, and he still takes 5 damage. On Kyle's turn, he plays a mountain, and then casts an Izzet Chemister. He immediately activates Izzet Chemister, exiling Welding Sparks from his graveyard, and then he moves to combat, attacking Nina for 4 with Torbran. On Nina's turn, she moves straight to combat, triggering Shadrax to put a +1/+1 counter on each of her creatures, and letting Kyle draw a card and lose a life. She then attacks Kyle for 23 total damage. However, before the damage, he flips up his morph creature, revealing Fortune Thief, making it so any damage he takes can't reduce him to less than 1 life. Unfortunately for him though, Nina has the answer, casting Baleful Mastery to exile the Fortune Thief before damage, winning her the game. Alright, so that was a sweet game. It was tons of fun. Kind of felt like we were embodying the turtle in that game. We went last to start off with. We really couldn't do too much. We were moving pretty slow. Not quite what I wanted to see out of the deck, but I do think that the power of the deck was noticeable. We had tons of card draw. We were able to have some recursion. We were able to do plenty of things with our turtles. We just unfortunately couldn't find a ton of turtles. So we eventually got knocked out by Shadrax. And the back and forth at the end there between the 2 dragon decks was pretty entertaining to watch. And eventually Shadrax came out with the win, wound up showing that even just some Strixhaven cards can definitely be very powerful when put together properly. So, phenomenal job for Nina for winning the game. And then I think Kyle's deck also did very well. Lena as well. The elves were pretty spooky at a couple of points in there. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the game. As always, if you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know in the comments below. Please send me an email, send them to me on Twitter, Reddit, wherever you can. Like and subscribe the video as always. I'd love to see the channel continue to grow. We've gotten a lot of great people that have joined lately. But thank you all for watching. Thank you for checking out the deck tech, the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you all on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.